long before the first tourists arrived. Before the highways and skylines, Florida lay hidden beneath a warm, shallow sea. Its future coastlines slowly forming from the skeletal remains of ancient coral. The wonders of Florida emerge from this submerged past. A peninsula shaped by forces that continue to reshape it today. Hurricanes carve new inlets into barrier islands. Springs push 40 million liters of crystalline water to the surface each day. Mangrove forests stand as living filtration systems along 700 kilometers of tangled coastline. This is the hidden side most tourists never see. Not the crowded attractions or familiar beaches, but a landscape where Spanish stone fortresses have weathered 4 centuries of Atlantic storms, where rivers of sawgrass flow imperceptibly through wetlands larger than some nations, and where Cuban coffee still brews in the same storefronts that welcomed exiles decades ago. From the coral-built foundations of the Keys to the wild reaches of the northern coast, Florida remains a place where the sea never truly released its grip. The story written here is one of water, resilience, and a beauty that reveals itself only to those who look beyond the surface. Our journey begins where those coral foundations find their fullest expression. At the very end of the island chain, where the overseas highway finally runs out of ocean to cross. Key West rises from these ancient reef bones. A small island that has collected centuries of stories within its few square miles. Here, wreckers once grew wealthy salvaging cargo from ships that misjudged the shallow waters. Writers and artists followed, drawn by isolation and affordable rents that have long since vanished. Mallory Square transforms each evening into an open-air celebration of the setting sun. Street performers stake out their patches of cobblestone as the crowd gathers. Jugglers toss flaming torches while trained cats leap through hoops. The real show happens on the horizon, where the sun sinks into the Gulf of Mexico in shades of orange and crimson. This nightly ritual has continued for decades, a tradition that began with hippies in the 1960s and never stopped. The southernmost point stands as a simple concrete marker, painted in bold stripes. Tourists line up throughout the day to photograph themselves beside it, standing just 90 miles from Cuba. The buoy-shaped monument replaced a sign that kept getting stolen. Beyond it, nothing but water stretches toward the Caribbean, a reminder of how far this island sits from the American mainland. Duval Street runs through the heart of Key West like a main artery pumping life through the town. Victorian mansions turned into guest houses line the quieter blocks. Bars and shops crowd together closer to the waterfront, their doors open to catch the tropical breeze. Ernest Hemingway drank at several establishments along this stretch. The street connects the Gulf of Mexico on one end to the Atlantic Ocean on the other. A walk of barely a mile that crosses the entire island. North from Key West, the coral-built foundations continue their work, carrying us back along a scattered chain of limestone islands where the mainland gradually reasserts itself. The Florida Keys stretch into the Gulf of Mexico like stepping stones, leading away from the continent. Here, the Atlantic Ocean meets the Gulf Stream in waters that shift from deep blue to brilliant turquoise. This is where Florida finally surrenders to the sea that shaped it. The 7-mile bridge carries travelers across open water in a way few roads on Earth can match. Completed in 1982, this ribbon of concrete and steel spans nearly 11 kilometers between Knights Key and Little Duck Key. The original bridge, built in the early 1900s as part of Henry Flagler's Overseas Railroad, still runs parallel in weathered segments. That older structure stands as a monument to an era when engineers believed they could tame these waters with iron and ambition. Driving across, the horizon stretches unbroken in every direction. The sea spreads out beneath and beside the roadway, its colors changing with the angle of the sun. Pelicans glide low over the swells, while fishing boats dot the distant blue. For those few minutes of crossing, the boundary between driving and sailing seems to dissolve, leaving only the endless meeting of sky and water. Beyond the Keys, the peninsula holds a different kind of water world, where rivers of sawgrass flow southward into one of the most remarkable wildernesses on the continent. Everglades National Park sprawls across the southern tip of Florida, a wetland system unlike any other on Earth. This is not a swamp in the traditional sense, but a slow-moving river, 50 miles wide and only inches deep. The water creeps through sawgrass prairies at a pace almost too slow to perceive. Yet this gentle current sustains an entire world. The landscape here shifts between distinct ecosystems within walking distance of each other. Hardwood hammocks rise like islands from the marsh, dense with tropical trees found nowhere else in North America. Cypress domes stand in shallow water, their knobby roots breaking the surface like ancient sentinels. Coastal prairies give way to mangrove estuaries, where fresh water finally meets the salt of Florida Bay. Each zone supports creatures adapted to its particular conditions. American alligators patrol the waterways as they have for millions of years. Roseate spoonbills wade through shallows, their pink feathers startling against the green. The endangered Florida panther moves through the park's northern reaches, one of fewer than 200 remaining in the wild. At night, the chorus of frogs and insects fills the humid air with sound. This wilderness persists because the water still flows, connecting everything in an intricate web that has survived since long before human memory. Where the Everglades meet the Gulf of Mexico, the 10,000 islands begin their maze-like scatter into open water, and Marco Island rises from the shallow sea. This barrier island sits at the meeting point of mangrove wilderness and open sea. The Calusa people once thrived here, building shell mounds that still mark the landscape. Today, the island holds traces of that ancient past beneath its modern surface. Tigertail Beach reveals the quieter character of Marco Island, set apart from the developed southern shores. A tidal lagoon separates the main beach from a crescent-shaped sandbar that shifts with the seasons. Wading birds patrol the shallow waters, hunting among the seagrass beds. The lagoon attracts osprey, roseate spoonbills, and great blue herons throughout the year. The sandbar itself changes shape as storms and currents rework the coastline. Some years it connects fully to the shore, other times it remains an island unto itself. Shelling here rewards the patient eye, with lightning whelks and sand dollars scattered along the tide line. This stretch of coast belongs more to the wildlife than to visitors. A reminder that Florida's beauty often lies in the spaces left untamed. Continuing north along the southwestern coast, where the Gulf of Mexico meets carefully preserved shorelines, lies Naples. This stretch of Florida traded the frenzy of development for something quieter. Here, wealth built itself into the landscape without erasing it. The result is a coastline where natural beauty and refined living exist in unusual balance. The waterfront estates of Naples line canals and bays with understated grandeur. Mediterranean-style villas sit behind walls of mature palms and flowering hedges. Private docks extend into calm waters where manatees drift past million-dollar boats. These properties face west and built to capture sunsets that paint the Gulf in shades of copper and rose each evening. Beyond the manicured lawns, mangrove channels wind through protected waters. Pelicans glide low over the surface, while dolphins arc through the shallows. The estates here do not fight against the subtropical environment. Instead, they fold into it, their architecture acknowledging the water that shapes everything in this corner of Florida. The sea that once covered this land still defines how people choose to live upon it. The coastline curves northward from Naples into a city where that same Gulf water inspired something unexpected. Sarasota, a place where art and nature exist in rare balance. This city grew from fishing village to cultural center over the past century. Circus money and winter residents built institutions here that still stand. The water remains the constant, drawing eyes westward towards sunsets that paint the sky in shades visitors never forget. Siesta Key Beach stretches along a barrier island just offshore from the city center. The sand here feels different underfoot, cooler than expected even on the hottest days. This happens because the grains are 99% pure quartz crystal. It's washed down from the Appalachian Mountains over countless millennia. Families spread blankets across this white expanse, while pelicans patrol the waterline in silent formation. Back on the mainland, St. Armand's Circle offers a different rhythm entirely. John Ringling designed this shopping district in the 1920s, imagining a European-style plaza under Florida palms. Statues from his personal collection still stand among the boutiques and restaurants. The circular layout guides visitors past galleries and cafes without the rush found elsewhere along the coast. Near the bayfront, the unconditional surrender statue rises over 7.5 meters into the air. This sculpture recreates the famous photograph from Times Square at the end of World War II. Sailors and nurses posed beneath it for decades before it found a permanent home here. The statue catches afternoon light against the marina backdrop, connecting this quiet city to a moment of national celebration, frozen in time. Just north of Sarasota, another barrier island holds its ground against the tides with quieter determination. This slender stretch of sand sits at the mouth of Tampa Bay. 7 miles of shoreline face the open Gulf. The island has resisted the high-rise development that transformed much of Florida's coast, keeping its character intact through the decades. Holmes Beach occupies the central portion of the island, the largest of its 3 small communities. Low-slung cottages and beach bungalows line streets shaded by sea grape and palm. No building here stands taller than the trees. This was a deliberate choice, written into local codes that protect the horizon from concrete towers. The result feels like stepping into a Florida that existed 50 years ago. The beach itself stretches wide and unhurried. White sand gives way to shallow Gulf waters that warm quickly under the subtropical sun. Sandbars emerge at low tide, creating temporary islands where wading birds gather. Dolphins patrol the nearshore waters in the early morning hours. The rhythm here follows the tides rather than traffic lights, a pace that reveals itself slowly to those willing to match it. From Anna Maria Island, the coastline sweeps toward Tampa Bay, where a modern marvel rises from those ancient waters. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge stretches across the mouth of the bay, connecting St. Petersburg to the southern reaches of the Florida Peninsula. Its distinctive yellow cables fan outward from twin towers that climb over 130 meters into the Gulf Coast sky. This is not merely a crossing, but a journey suspended between two worlds of blue. The bridge replaced an older structure after tragedy struck in 1980, when a freighter collision brought down a section of the original span. What rose in its place became an engineering triumph and an unexpected symbol of resilience. The cable-stayed design was among the longest of its kind in the world when it opened in 1987. Drivers crossing today travel more than 6.5 kilometers over open water, the Gulf of Mexico spreading endlessly to the west. At certain hours, the Skyway becomes something more than infrastructure. Sunrise paints the cables in shades of copper and gold, while pelicans glide beneath the roadway. Sunset transforms the entire structure into a silhouette against purple and orange skies that seem to stretch forever. Fishermen cast lines from the remaining piers of the old bridge, now converted into the longest fishing pier in the world. Here, where concrete meets salt air, the Florida reveals that even its highways carry stories of the sea. The Skyway delivers travelers to the western shore of Tampa Bay, where the story of water and resilience continues on a finger of land reaching into calmer seas. Here, on a finger of land reaching into Tampa Bay, sits St. Petersburg. This city grew from swampland and sunshine into something unexpected. Its waterfront stretches for miles, catching light that painters have chased for generations. Rising from the white sands of St. Pete Beach stands the Don Cesar Hotel, a vision in pink that seems almost dreamlike against the blue Gulf waters. Built in 1928, this Mediterranean-style palace earned the nickname Pink Palace almost immediately. Its coral-colored towers have witnessed nearly a century of Florida history. During the Second World War, the military converted it into a convalescent center for airmen. The building fell into disrepair afterward, sitting empty and weathered for years. Restoration brought it back to life in the 1970s. And today, it anchors the beach with the same romantic grandeur its original builder imagined. South of the city, Fort DeSoto Park spreads across 5 interconnected islands at the mouth of Tampa Bay. This 1,000-acre preserve holds what many consider Florida's finest public beach. The fort itself dates to the Spanish-American War, its massive mortars still pointing toward open water. Beyond the historic batteries, nature reclaims the land. Mangroves twist along quiet kayak trails. Shorebirds gather in numbers that darken the sand. The park offers something increasingly rare along Florida's developed coastline. A glimpse of what these barrier islands looked like before the hotels and highways arrived. Across the bay from St. Petersburg, among storefronts where Cuban coffee still brews, Tampa holds more history than any other city on this coast. This Gulf Coast city grew from a modest military outpost into a thriving port town. Its identity was forged not by beaches or theme parks, but by cigar smoke and immigrant dreams. The layers of Tampa's past remain visible to anyone willing to wander its older streets. Ybor City stands as the living heart of that immigrant story. Founded in 1885 by Vicente Martinez Ybor, this district once produced more hand-rolled cigars than anywhere else in the world. Cuban, Spanish, and Italian workers filled its brick factories and row houses. Today, those same buildings house restaurants, galleries, and nightclubs, yet the original cobblestone streets remain underfoot. Wrought iron balconies still overlook 7th Avenue, where cigar workers once strolled during their breaks. The scent of roasting coffee drifts from La Segunda Bakery, operating since 1915. Ybor City carries its heritage without apology, a neighborhood that refuses to forget where it came from. Across the Hillsborough River, the Henry B. Plant Museum offers a different chapter of Tampa's rise. Housed within the silver minarets of the former Tampa Bay Hotel, this museum preserves the vision of a railroad magnate who brought wealth and winter visitors to Florida's west coast. Plant completed his Grand Hotel in 1891, filling its rooms with European furniture and Asian antiquities. The building itself blends Moorish Revival architecture with Victorian excess. Walking through its restored parlors, visitors glimpse the ambitions of a man who believed he could turn swampland into paradise. The museum grounds stretch along the riverbank, where palm trees now shade pathways that Gilded Age guests once strolled. North of Tampa, the Gulf Coast reveals another character entirely, where those ancient coral foundations gave way to sugary white sand, and the Clearwater region stretches toward the horizon. This barrier island community sits where the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico meet the Florida mainland. The sand here carries a particular quality, made of fine quartz crystals that stay cool even under the midday sun. Gentle waves lap against shores that slope gradually into calm, shallow waters. Clearwater Beach draws families and solitary wanderers alike to its wide expanse of shoreline. The beach runs for nearly 5 kilometers along the island's western edge. Morning light transforms the sand into a pale ribbon between sea and sky. Local shorebirds patrol the waterline, their movements unhurried as they search for small creatures in the wet sand. This stretch of coast consistently ranks among the finest urban beaches in the country. Pier 60 extends into the Gulf from the heart of the beach district. Built in 1962, this fishing pier has become a gathering place for more than anglers. Each evening, crowds assemble here to witness the sunset ritual. Street performers set up along the wooden planks as the sun begins its descent. The sky shifts through shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the water below, while musicians and artists create an impromptu festival atmosphere that has continued for decades. Just beyond Clearwater's resort beaches, the sea's grip holds firm on a slender barrier island that has weathered countless storms. Honeymoon Island State Park stretches across this narrow strip of sand and pine, a fragment of old Florida preserved against the tide of development. The park sits just off the coast near Dunedin, connected to the mainland by a causeway that feels like a bridge between two different worlds. Here, the rush of modern life fades into salt air and the rustle of palm fronds. The island earned its romantic name in the 1940s, when thatched bungalows welcomed newlywed couples seeking seclusion. Those honeymoon cottages vanished long ago, swept away by hurricanes. Yet the island kept its name and its wild character. Virgin/pine forests still cover portions of the interior, survivors of an ecosystem that once blanketed much of coastal Florida. Walking beneath these ancient trees feels like stepping backward through time itself. Each spring, osprey return to Honeymoon Island to raise their young in nests built high atop dead pine snags. These fishhawks circle above the shallow waters, diving with precision to snatch mullet from the waves. The park protects one of the largest osprey nesting colonies on Florida's Gulf Coast, with dozens of active nests visible from trails and beaches. Visitors who look upward often spot the distinctive silhouettes of these raptors against cloudless skies, their calls echoing across the dunes as they have for generations. Leaving the Gulf Coast behind, Central Florida tells a different story altogether. Orlando rises from what was once swampland and citrus groves, a city that transformed itself over the span of a single generation. Here, lakes dot the landscape like scattered mirrors, remnants of the limestone bedrock that still shapes the region below. The modern skyline stands where orange blossoms once perfumed the air for kilometers in every direction. Lake Eola Park sits at the geographic and spiritual heart of downtown Orlando. A 43-acre green space surrounds the lake, offering a quiet refuge from the surrounding urban pulse. The iconic Lindy's Landing fountain illuminates the water each evening, its colored lights reflecting across the surface. Swan-shaped paddle boats glide past cypress trees that have watched the city grow around them. A paved sidewalk traces the shoreline for nearly a kilometer, drawing joggers, families, and those seeking a moment of stillness. Beyond the downtown core, Universal Orlando Resort represents another side of the city's identity. What began as a single theme park in 1990 has expanded into a sprawling entertainment complex. Visitors walk through meticulously constructed worlds that blur the line between fiction and reality. The resort draws millions each year, yet its scale speaks to something larger about Orlando itself. This is a city built on imagination, where marshland became metropolis and dreams took physical form. "300 kilometers north of Orlando, the story of Florida takes a different turn in the rolling hills of the Panhandle. Here in Tallahassee, the state capital rises among canopy roads and red clay soil. This city feels more like the Deep South than the tropical peninsula below. Oak trees draped in Spanish moss-lined streets that lead to the center of Florida's political life. The Florida State Capitol complex tells the story of a state that outgrew its origins. The historic Capitol building dates back to 1845, the year Florida joined the Union. Its white dome and red-striped awnings recall a time when this small structure housed all branches of government. Lawmakers once gathered in chambers that now serve as a museum of Florida's political history. Behind the old building rises the new Capitol, a 22-story tower completed in 1977. From its observation deck, the view stretches across Tallahassee's green landscape to the distant hills. The contrast between old and new capitals captures something essential about Florida itself. A state forever balancing its past with the demands of relentless growth and change. East of Tallahassee, the Atlantic reasserts its presence along the wild northern coast, where Jacksonville sprawls across the landscape. This sprawling city stretches across more land than any other in the continental United States. Rivers wind through its neighborhoods like veins carrying life to distant reaches. Here, the story of water and resilience finds one of its most compelling chapters. The St. Johns River defines Jacksonville in ways few waterways shape their cities. It flows northward, one of only a handful of rivers on the continent to defy the expected path toward the sea. For thousands of years, this dark, tannin-stained water has served as highway, food source, and gathering place. Manatees drift through its deeper channels during winter months. Osprey circle above, hunting mullet in the shallows near downtown bridges. Following the river toward the Atlantic, the landscape opens into Jacksonville Beach. Salt air replaces the freshwater humidity of the inland waterways. Wide stretches of sand extend for kilometers along the shoreline. Unlike the crowded beaches farther south, this coast maintains a quieter character. Fishing piers reach into the surf, where anglers cast lines at dawn. Sea oats bend in the coastal breeze, their roots holding dunes in place against the endless push of wind and wave. Morning light on Jacksonville Beach reveals the timeless rhythm of this coast. Pelicans glide low over incoming swells. Sandpipers race along the waterline, chasing retreating foam. The same forces that shaped Florida from its coral foundations continue their patient work here. Grain by grain, tide by tide. South of Jacksonville, those Spanish stone fortresses mentioned at our journey's start stand nowhere more proudly than in St. Augustine. Founded in 1565, this coastal city clings to the northeastern shore, where the Matanzas River meets the Atlantic. 4.5 centuries of history have left their mark on every cobblestone street and weathered wall. Here, the past refuses to fade into memory. The Castillo de San Marcos rises from the waterfront like a monument carved from the sea itself. Built from coquina, a local stone formed entirely of compressed shells. The fortress absorbed cannonballs rather than shattering under their impact. Construction began in 1672 and took 23 years to complete. British siege cannons, pirate raids, and hurricane winds have all failed to bring down these walls. The star-shaped bastions still stand guard over Matanzas Bay, silent witnesses to conflicts that shaped a continent. Beyond the fortress walls, the historic district unfolds through narrow lanes lined with buildings from 3 different centuries. Spanish colonial architecture blends with British modifications and American additions in a patchwork of styles. Coquina walls give way to wooden balconies draped in flowering vines. Horse-drawn carriages still travel these same routes that Spanish soldiers once patrolled on foot. Flagler College anchors the district with its soaring towers and red-tiled roofs. Originally built as the Ponce de Leon Hotel in 1888 by railroad magnate Henry Flagler, the building introduced Spanish Renaissance Revival architecture to American shores. Tiffany-stained glass windows filter light through the former hotel lobby. Today, students walk beneath the same ornate ceilings that once welcomed Gilded Age travelers seeking Florida sunshine. The Atlantic coast continues southward from St. Augustine to a stretch of shoreline where hard-packed sand meets the relentless push of tides, Daytona Beach. This stretch of shoreline earned its reputation not through gentle waves alone, but through the roar of engines that once tested their limits on these wide, flat sands. The same geological forces that shaped Florida's peninsula created something rare here. 23 miles of beach compressed firm enough to bear the weight of automobiles. Daytona International Speedway rises from the coastal lowlands like a monument to velocity. The track opened in 1959, replacing the original beach and road course where drivers had raced since the 1930s. Its high-banked turns pitch at 31 degrees, steep enough that standing on them feels like defying gravity. The infield lake reflects Florida's ever-present water table, a reminder that even here, the peninsula's watery origins assert themselves. Each February, the Daytona 500 draws hundreds of thousands to witness machines circling at speeds their beach racing predecessors could never have imagined. The drive-on beach tradition continues along designated sections of this coastline. Families park their vehicles where the tide has retreated, setting up chairs within arm's reach of their cars. This practice dates back over a century, when automobiles first proved themselves against the hard sand. The beach itself becomes a thoroughfare, a parking lot, and a destination all at once. Few places in the world still permit this unusual relationship between machine and shore. At the southern end of this coastal stretch, Ponce Inlet Lighthouse stands 175 feet tall. Completed in 1887, its red brick tower has guided mariners past dangerous shoals for well over 100 years. The lighthouse keepers' dwellings cluster at its base, preserved now as museums holding maritime artifacts. From the observation deck, the full sweep of Daytona's coast reveals itself. That remarkable ribbon of sand where Florida's past and present share the same shoreline. South of Daytona, the Atlantic shoreline leads to a community where the sea shares the sky with something else entirely. The rockets of Cape Canaveral rising above Cocoa Beach. This barrier island community sits just east of the Kennedy Space Center, where rockets have launched into the heavens for over 6 decades. The beach here runs wide and welcoming, with sand the color of brown sugar, meeting waters that shift between green and blue. Surfers have claimed these waves since the 1960s, drawn by consistent swells that roll in from the open ocean. Cocoa Beach Pier stretches 800 feet over the Atlantic. A wooden pathway built in 1962. Fishermen cast lines from its weathered planks at dawn, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. Pelicans perch on the railings, patient observers of the morning catch. The structure has weathered countless storms, rebuilt and restored after hurricanes that would have claimed lesser landmarks. Walking its length, the beach falls away on either side, and the vast Atlantic opens before you. From the pier's end, the horizon curves gently, a reminder of the planet's true shape that most landlocked views cannot offer. Salt air carries the sound of waves breaking against the pilings below. Dolphins sometimes surface in the distance, their fins catching light before disappearing again. This simple wooden structure connects land to sea in the most direct way possible. A place where Florida's relationship with the water becomes something you can stand upon and feel beneath your feet. Continuing down the Atlantic coast, that same water that shaped Florida's ancient foundations still defines one of its most distinctive cities. Fort Lauderdale rises from the southeastern coast, built not against the sea, but alongside it. Over 400 kilometers of canals thread through neighborhoods and beneath bridges. This is a city where water serves as both boundary and boulevard. Las Olas Boulevard stretches from the downtown core toward the Atlantic shore. The name means the waves in Spanish, a fitting title for a street that connects urban life to ocean breezes. Boutiques and galleries line the sidewalks beneath canopies of shade trees. Art Deco facades stand beside modern storefronts, creating a streetscape that spans decades of architectural taste. Evening brings a different energy as restaurant patios fill and pedestrians outnumber cars. The canal system transforms Fort Lauderdale into something unlike any other Florida city. Waterways branch through residential areas where homes face the current rather than the road. Yachts and sailboats dock in backyards. Water taxis carry passengers past mansions and beneath drawbridges. The network earned Fort Lauderdale its nickname as the Venice of America, though the comparison only captures part of its character. These channels serve as living transportation corridors, not museum pieces frozen in time. Las Olas Beach waits at the boulevard's eastern end, where the Atlantic finally comes into view. The sand here stretches wide and pale beneath the subtropical sun. Waves roll in with a gentle consistency that draws swimmers and paddlers alike. Palm trees lean toward the water as if curious about what lies beyond the horizon. This shoreline offers something increasingly rare along Florida's developed coast. A beach that still feels connected to the neighborhood behind it rather than walled off from it. Across the intracoastal waterway from Fort Lauderdale, that same resilience found new expression on a slender barrier island where Miami Beach rose from mangrove swamps. What began as farmland transformed into one of America's most recognizable coastal communities. Palm-lined streets now run where wetlands once stood. The Atlantic shapes life here, its salt air settling over pastel buildings and white sand shores. The Art Deco Historic District preserves a remarkable chapter of American architecture. More than 800 buildings stand within a square mile, most constructed between 1923 and 1943. Curved corners and porthole windows echo the ocean liners of that era. Geometric patterns carved into facades catch morning light differently than afternoon shadow. This collection represents the largest concentration of Art Deco architecture anywhere in the world. Ocean Drive runs along the eastern edge of this district, facing the beach across a narrow park. Hotels and restaurants occupy ground floors beneath residential apartments that have witnessed decades of change. Neon signs glow at dusk, their colors reflecting off polished terrazzo floors inside lobbies frozen in another time. The street functions as both thoroughfare and outdoor museum, where architecture becomes the main attraction. South Beach extends beyond the historic core, stretching from the tip of the island northward. Wide beaches meet calm waters, where the Gulf Stream moderates temperatures year-round. Lifeguard towers painted in bright hues dot the shoreline at regular intervals. Morning joggers share the sand, with photographers capturing first light on the waterfront. The neighborhood carries forward what the sea started long ago, a place shaped and reshaped by forces both natural and human. West across Biscayne Bay, that Cuban coffee still brews in a city that rose from the same coral foundations as the rest of this peninsula. Miami sits where the Everglades once met the sea, a place carved from mangrove swamps little more than a century ago. Today it stands as Florida's most vibrant urban center. The city pulses with cultures drawn from across the Caribbean and Latin America, their influences visible on every corner. In the Wynwood neighborhood, abandoned warehouses have become an open-air gallery unlike any other. The Wynwood walls transformed this forgotten industrial district starting in 2009. Massive murals now cover entire building facades, their colors bold against the Miami sun. Street artists from dozens of countries have left their marks here. Each visit reveals something new as works rotate and evolve with the neighborhood itself. Biscayne Bay spreads east of the downtown towers, its shallow turquoise waters separating the mainland from the barrier islands beyond. Manatees drift through seagrass beds that have survived despite the city growing around them. Stiltsville rises from the bay's southern reaches, a collection of wooden houses perched above the water since the 1930s. The bay remains Miami's liquid heart, connecting its scattered pieces across the water. Little Havana carries the soul of Cuban Miami within its streets. Calle Ocho runs through the district's center, lined with cigar shops and domino parks where old men gather in afternoon shade. The scent of roasting coffee drifts from ventanitas, small walk-up windows serving cafecito to passing neighbors. At Bayside Marketplace along the waterfront, the bay meets the city in a different way, where boats bob at the docks and the skyline reflects across the harbor at sunset. From Key West to Jacksonville, from the Everglades to Orlando, we have traced the waters that shaped this land, and the sea that once covered this peninsula never truly left. It lingers in the slow drift of water through the Everglades, in the salt air that settles over Little Havana's coffee windows, and in the coral bones beneath Key West's cobblestone streets. Florida reveals itself not through its crowded attractions, but through these quieter moments, where the ancient and modern exist side by side. From the coquina walls of Castillo de San Marcos to the osprey nests of Honeymoon Island, from the Art Deco curves of Ocean Drive to the sawgrass prairies flowing toward Florida Bay, this peninsula holds more than most visitors ever discover. The water keeps shaping it, tide by tide, storm by storm, and the story continues to write itself along every coastline and canal. Click on the video that's appearing now to continue your journey of the wonders of the world.